And then the question was, how as a company do we take this forward? How do we establish this as a potential opportunity for the company? And so we had to convince the company that this was an important opportunity. So obviously we met with Ben, met with the research team in Europe, and we had to pitch internally to the executive committee of Medtronic that we wanted to spend time and resources on this project. And what made it very easy, though, was just the visual nature of the outcome. You could show a picture and then say, this is what's possible.
Welcome to Stimulating Brains.
Hello and welcome to Stimulating Brains. So far in the podcast, I have been interviewing key opinion leaders from academia and clinical practice, and sometimes individual patients that graciously shared their insights after undergoing DBS surgery. However, beyond patients and clinicians, there is a third component necessary for success of DBS, which are, of course, our partners in the industry. Without great industry leadership, it is hard, if impossible, to translate scientific findings into clinical practice. For instance, when the Grenoble team developed Deep Brain Stimulation back in the 80s and 90s, they needed a strong industry partner to bring their breakthrough therapy into clinical practice. So in some of the upcoming episodes, including the present one, I will interview executives from the device industry. Who better to start this journey with than Todd Langevin, who has been a key figure in the field of DBS and neuromodulation on the industry side for decades. Following the success of Benabid's team in Grenoble inside Medtronic, Todd led the internal venturing team that pitched, developed and launched DBS, which is now an 800 million business worldwide. So in a sense, we may owe it to Todd's team similarly as much as to the scientific team in Grenoble that DBS has become a therapy that is being applied worldwide. During his 20 years at Medtronic, he grew the DBS business to a 350 million unit revenue. After a brief hiatus in the cardiac world, he moved back to DBS to lead the startup Functional Neuromodulation as CEO, which aims at establishing DBS to the fornix as a treatment for Alzheimer's disease, following the breakthrough successes made by the Lozano team in Toronto. Indeed, under Todd's leadership, the company achieved the CE mark for the treatment in Europe. Finally, in 2021, Todd moved to Biotronik, where he currently is the president of the Neuromodulation Business. I very much hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I had, and also that you will enjoy the decision to talk to industry folks a bit more on this podcast. Obviously, I will continue talking to scientists and clinical researchers, as well as hopefully patients as well. Thank you so much for tuning in, Stimulating Brains. Yeah, so thank you so much, Todd, for agreeing to do this interview with me. I'm super excited. It's one in a, let's say, new angle of also talking to more folks in industry in the DBS field. Just talked to Binish Chiran the other day from Abbott, and there are some more plans also planned from other industry leaders. And I will have already introduced you a bit formally by now, so we can jump into the content directly. And as you know, I heard you have listened to the podcast before. To break the ice, I always ask about free time and hobbies. I know you're a busy person, but anything you do beyond working?
Yeah. I've always liked to stay in shape and be active. So in the summers, I do a lot of mountain biking. And in Minnesota, there aren't any mountains, so I pretty much stay on the flats. But I do try to train for a bike race that's done in Wisconsin called the Chequamegon 40-mile bike race. And some years I do the 40, some 2 years I do the short one, depending on how much time I get on the bike. And I also, while I'm biking, I listen to podcasts. And so I really got into your podcast last summer, and it's a great way to spend the time while you're pedaling around the lakes in Minneapolis listening to your podcast. I think you do a great job, and I love listening to the people you interview and hearing their perspective. So, and then skiing in the winter as much as I can. I like to ski, and I like to read. Do a lot of as much reading as I can. I'm a sucker for good book reviews. So if I see a good book review, I quickly order the book, and then I've got a pile of books on my desk or my bedside that I need to get to at some point. And I've
Okay.
got two grandkids, so I'm back into changing diapers, and we spend a lot of time with them, 2 years and 4 years, and
Fantastic.
they're just great little kids, Ella and Tally.
That's great. We just have our like grandparents of our kids over, and they are also back into changing diapers now. So I can relate to that. Fantastic. And since you mentioned mountain biking, I loosely remembered seeing, an old article one day about Lothar Krinke when he was still at Medtronic, also doing a lot of biking. Did you ever get to bike with him at the time, or
No,
since you're
never bike.
no?
No,
Okay,
never biked with Lotar. No, and I
okay.
knew we did that, but I haven't. No, afraid not.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so in your career, very very interesting a career you had. Who were key mentors or turning points that brought you to where you are now?
I think probably the biggest event for me, really, as you may hear in the conversation, my career hasn't really been planned out. I think I've taken advantage of opportunities and been in the right place at the right time and been lucky, frankly. And I was doing a biology degree at Minnesota, and I took an interesting class which I thought would be fun to do. It was a chronobiology class there, and so I had to do a project for that chronobiology class. So I went over to Franz Hallberg's lab, who happened to be he's known as the father of chronobiology, actually, coined the word circadian, and just walked in there, and they let me see him, and he said, "Yeah, you can do a little project here for us." So it involved collecting rat urine for 24 hours with these rats and doing some urinary analysis on the circadian rhythmicity of some electrolytes and things like that. And I really loved it. I loved being in the lab. I loved working there. He was an interesting guy, and he had people coming through his lab all the time from all over the world. And I asked him if I could continue to work there and just do animal experiments, taking care of the animals, learn how to do data analysis. And I met a guy named Bill Reshevsky, who was a oncologist there who had showed up at Hallberg's lab, and he was really interested in chronobiology and the applications of biological rhythms to cancer chemotherapy. So when I graduated, Bill, he got an NIH grant to study this in ovarian and bladder cancer, and cysteamine, dichloroplatinum, and doxorubicin for treating those conditions. And he asked me if I would come and work at his lab when he got the grant, so I did that, and I was exposed to tremendous amount of things there: animal experiments, study design, writing paper abstracts, staying up 24 hours at a time doing these experiments in the lab, and it was a great experience. So he gave me a lot of opportunity and responsibility
Great.
there, and I'd say that was a pretty important turning point for me, because eventually we started using Medtronic Synchromed pumps for the study,
Huh.
and I got to know Medtronic people. I got to go in the OR to support the pump implants. And that's how I got into Medtronic, through that experience. So it's just all from taking a biology class, going to Hallberg's lab, meeting Reshevsky, and getting to Medtronic. It just
Follow the
happened that
flow.
way.
Yeah. 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 Interesting. Was Medtronic a very different company at the time compared to now? Was it smaller? I mean, surely a bit smaller, but would you say?
So at that time, it was purely a cardiovascular company, and they
Yeah.
started this venture using technology that they had, in-house to apply to this pump. So they wanted to develop the pump for an artificial pancreas. That didn't work out so well. It was too difficult at the time, and they expanded the application to cancer chemotherapy, intraarterial infusion of a drug called FUDR at the time. And it was sort of a venture within the company they were funding. So that's how the pump was used. That was the first approval for the Synchromed pump, actually. And so the company then was like $800 million in revenue. Since the acquisition of Covidien, it's probably 30 plus billion now.
Wow,
So it's a pretty small company when I first joined there.
fantastic. And so you spent most of your career in industry, and we'll get to that. But looking back now at the time in academia, how do you see it now? Was it the Wild West? Was it fun? Was it, I don't know? How would you rate it now?
In academia or
Yeah.
industry at that time?
No, academia at the time. Your time went in the lab.
So as I said, it was a tremendous experience for me because I got exposed to top-notch scientists and clinicians at the University of Minnesota. Names, John Najarian was around at the time. He was doing the first transplants. Just people like that who you come across and cross paths with. And I got we had an NIH grant, so some significant funding was available to us to do quite a few interesting things. And a lot of students would come through the lab as well and visiting, professors from other parts of the world. So I really got exposed to the sort of the international nature of things, what it's like to write papers and publish, the demands associated with that, and also the demands of keeping a lab going. And,
Yeah.
I didn't have those personally, but I knew the pressure was there to keep the funding coming in, pay people, what's on the horizon, keep writing grants. So it's it was a great learning experience for me to get exposed to just the process of what goes on in academia,
Yeah.
and also the translational science of taking things from the lab, to the clinic, and ultimately to a commercial application, which was couldn't have been a better training ground.
Fantastic. So Alim Louis Benabid, as we know, published the first modern-day case series of thalamic DBS for Parkinson's in 1987, and that's the exact same year that you moved to Medtronic. Is that a coincidence, or probably still a coincidence at that time, right?
At that time, it was a total coincidence. Just so happened, yeah, it was the same year, but at that time, I didn't know anything about what Ben was doing when I joined.
Got it.
When I joined Medtronic, but I learned very quickly once I got there.
But so exactly that period then, because you led the internal venturing team that pitched and developed and then launched DBS at Medtronic, which is now at least an $800 million dollar business. Still quoting from your CV, maybe it's even more by now. So you were at, as you said, the right time at the right place. But how did it emerge? Like, how did Ben approach Medtronic, or you guys approach him, or how did it come together, and how then did you get involved into DBS?
Yeah, so it's fun to reminisce about those days. And we had a European headquarters in Medtronic. It was located, I think it was at Paris and in Brussels, but we had a research group in Maastricht in the Netherlands that was set up there. And Keith Mullett led that group, and Frans Gielen worked for Keith. And then we had a country organization, and the rep there, Daniel Pignol, really brought the opportunity through the European organization. And Ben was interested in applying our technology to brain stimulation, particularly tremor at the time. And so that's how we learned about it. And he had done some groundbreaking work, of course. And then the question was, how as a company do we take this forward? How do we establish this as a potential opportunity for the company? And so we had to convince the company that this was an important opportunity. So obviously we met with Ben, met with the research team in Europe, and we had to pitch internally to the executive committee of Medtronic that we wanted to spend time and resources on this project. And what made it very easy, though, was just the visual nature of the outcome.
Sure.
Right. You could show you didn't have to. You could show a picture and then say this is what's possible. And so one thing led to another, and we were able to sort of develop that relationship and then support Ben's work, to further develop the VIM application. And so that's how we got the attention of the company. But then we had to figure out how to transition his observations into a bigger study, and then ultimately he moved on also to STN and STN after that, and then GPI and so on. So that's kind of how it started. I got to give props to the European group, Keith and Franz for Gielan for originally saying, hey, this is something we should pay attention to.
Great. Yeah, I met Franz Gielan a few times actually when he was still around at Medtronic. He was a very interesting guy to talk to too. So remind me, at the time I think Medtronic had a pain device, right? And that was for spinal cord stimulation, and the max frequency was 130 hertz, which is why we still use that to this date, I think. And how big was the pain market, or the how established had that been? How long had that been on the market? Do you remember?
So the spinal cord stimulator was that Medtronic was selling at the time. So it's a spinal cord stimulator for chronic intractable pain, and this was so Medtronic had been selling that for probably 10, 15 years by then. It was still a pretty small market. It's grown tremendously to this day, but we had to modify the device. It was called iTrel 2 to be suitable for the pain application, which wasn't a huge transformation of that technology. We had to develop a DBS lead because the only other lead that we had was a lead for pain, which was a fairly brutal way to it had a ring at the end that was literally pushed down with a cannula to the PVG or PAG to treat pain, but that wasn't suitable for what Ben was doing. So we had to modify our 4-contact lead so that Ben could use that, and also so he could expand to 185 ultimately, from 130 to 185. And there's a little bit of technology developed, not a huge amount though, to just take that SCS device and use it for what Ben needed it.
And the first electrode, I think, was the 3380, with that 0 being the loop. And is that right? Is that why the name was 0? I heard that somewhere.
Oh, that could very well be. Okay. It was a 3380, 3380 for sure. And when I first learned how that was actually put in place, it was kind of a brutal way to approach it, but I guess that's how it was done in the early days, right?
Yeah. Okay, got it. And so how closely did you interact with the Grenoble team at the time? Were you in France a lot, or they in US?
Yeah, very closely. So visited Ben quite a few times in the during that time. I was still based in the US, and so we got to working on that project, and I led the DBS. We call the DBS venture team then, and so we assembled a few people from different functional areas to work on this, and the biggest task at hand right then was to get the clinical work done. So yeah, I spent a lot of time with Ben. We'd visit Grenoble quite often. I know he had a favorite restaurant that he'd always go to called the Auberge Napoleon, I believe, and sometimes I think they'd even open it up for him on Mondays when they were supposed to be closed. So we got the restaurant all to ourselves, and so it was a very interesting time, and I think that Abdel Benazouz would be coming through there, and I think Patricia Limousin was working there at the time. So
Pierre Polak.
Yeah, of course Pierre was part of that whole team, and it was an exciting time we didn't really know where it was going to end up. Of course, we just wanted to prove this out, and I think that the big Ben, have you been in Ben's operating room?
No, I have not.
No. So he had an operating room set up, because he used ventriculography, right, for targeting, and so he had an AP X-ray and a lateral X-ray that he would use, and it was right above the operating tables to adjust for parallax. So he used this sort of an older technique at that time to do coordinate planning. And he did careful work in the OR. He took a very long time. He was collecting microelectrode, information, a millimeter at a time from 5 electrodes. And he was doing that for, a purpose, because he knew he was going to have to go back and explain to everybody who was listening why the fundamentals of why this should work and the targeting around it. He did the same for STN. And so that was really important because one of the questions we had as a company, is this going to translate to other neurosurgeons, or is Ben the only one in the world that can do this?
Sure.
As it turns out, I mean, it was translatable, but it wasn't. VIM's one thing, but STN and GPI may have been, another thing.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing that the question came to mind. I would say that, to some degree, maybe depression is currently at a similar stage where some people say it works in the hands of Helen Mayberg, but will it scale to others? And so how did you guys approach that, or was there a, at the time most people were, I think, ACPC based targeting, then the frames might have been different. So what were the next steps once, let's say, you had, and I think we're jumping a bit forward here, but you had FDA, like CE mark or FDA approval, and others could test it, or even before the approval in multi-site trials. How did you guys approach that? Did the company play a part in educating other surgeons, or how did that pan out?
Yeah, well, I wish we could say we had a systematic approach. We did have an approach, and when we were starting the clinical work, we had European sites and U.S. sites, and I'll expand on that if you want. But remember, you always have to write instructions for your technology when you do a clinical trial.
Yeah.
And we were in a meeting one time with our group, and we had one of our executives say, "No, we're not in the position to tell neurosurgeons how to do their job. They're neurosurgeons, they're trained, they're functional neurosurgeons, they know stereotaxy. The first line in our manual should say, you have now located the ventral intermediate nucleus."
Got it.
So leave all that part up front to the neurosurgeons, but there's a lot of variability from surgeon to surgeon. So luckily, we had Ben in front of he would visit sites, and we do training. We had investigator meetings, and he would explain, how he was doing all this. And but still, we were leaving a lot of it up to the neurosurgeon to do the job that they were hopefully trained to do. And luckily, the procedure was robust enough to withstand some variability. And I would say that may not be the case for every indication we're looking at in brain stimulation these days. So we've learned a lot from that experience, and we wouldn't do that approach today.
Got it. Yeah, make sure. Yeah, I think it was also, as you said, a cardiac company at the time mainly, right? So this was certainly a bold and risky move from you guys to venture that way, and very, very fascinating. I heard via somebody that worked closely with Ben at the time that after the VIM there might have been also attempts to do pallidum, but then that was not as convincing at the time, and then they moved back to this STN, and then once the Bergman paper came out and Alim Benazou's work in humans, and then I think only later recovered took up the GPI again. Is that the same collection you had, that they tried GPI first and after the VIM?
I don't know that they tried it first,
Okay.
but I know Ben for sure was an STN advocate. And then from the pallidotomy work that had been done from Leighton and others, that had resurrected sort of pallidotomies, and then the extension of stimulation to this was sort of, I guess, also in part driven by DeLong's model of how the circuitry should be working in a functional state and a pathological state. So, and in fact, when we moved on from tremor to STN and GPI, we had a global meeting in Minneapolis, and we brought in, I probably missed some of these names here, but Tony Lang, Andres Warren Alano, Jose Obeso, Malin was there, I'm pretty sure. And we had some pretty serious people at that meeting. We talked about the study of doing STN versus GPI, or combining them in the same study and then comparing the two. So that was still an open, debate question for the company at the time. As it turned out, I believe the study did do both at the same time.
Yeah.
And we were able to evaluate not perfectly, but the relative merits of the two in that setting. So it wasn't nailed down right at the beginning. So we did have to do some work on that.
And so I think a big milestone was the New England Journal paper that was then published. And did that lead to FDA approval and CE mark? Is that correct?
I want to. Can I just go back to one thing though about
Absolutely.
VIM?
Yeah.
And we were still working on the VM project, and that I think Ben's paper was, he had an early paper in maybe Lancet, I think that's a mistake. And we were still trying to figure out how to move this therapy forward. So we had a US IDE, for VIM, and we got that approved, and it wasn't all that easy because FDA didn't get this at the time. And we had so many conversations with them. And then one time, after not the first one, the second or third one of the reviewers then asked, "Hey, is this the whole thing implantable?" So it just goes to show you their sense of knowledge of the DBS space wasn't very well established either. And then we had our first case in Florida, University of Florida, Tampa. And Warren Alano was a neurologist. He wanted to be the first one to do a case. And it just so happened that the case was scheduled around a World Society of Stereotactic Functional Surgery meeting in Ixtapa. So I was there, and then Ben was there, and Ben was presenting, and I asked him if he would leave the meeting and go support this case in Florida, which didn't seem far away from Mexico to Florida, but he said yes. Great. And we left the meeting, got on a plane, and Don Smith was the neurosurgeon there, and Mr. Schaefer, George Schaefer, was the patient with Parkinsonian tremor, and he had it for quite some time, 10 years, and it was really an awesome experience because we went to dinner the night before. We talked about the case. Of course, Smith doesn't have ventriculography, so Ben's in a foreign environment, different operating room, and we're not really sure how this is going to go. Excuse me. And we're in the operating room. You could see people from the outside looking in the round windows of operating rooms, peering in to see, because this French surgeon was there doing a procedure for the first patient in the U.S. trial.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Ben probably about fainted when Don Smith got out his millimeter ruler when he was advancing the lead ever so gently, pushing it, measuring, pushing it. Today we have microcontrollers that will advance it. But then he got to the spot that he thought was the right spot. We turned down the stimulator, and the tremor, as you've seen, it disappeared. Fantastic. And I'm not exaggerating, but there were tears in the operating room.
I'm sure.
From these nurses, and their operating room nurses are tough people, right? They've seen a lot. And then Mr. Schaefer asked for a pen. He was awake. He asked for a pen, and somebody asked him, "Why do you want a pen?" And he said, "Because I want to sign my name."
Wow.
For the first time in like 10 years or something like that. So it was just a really compelling experience and outcome. And he had Parkinsonian tremor, so tremor is his worst symptom. And then it was a huge success. And we didn't know because Ben was working with the newest. He had met the guy just the night before, and Don Smith did a great job and got the great outcome. And he I think he was featured on the cover of our annual report, or somewhere in the annual report, where he liked to make model airplanes, wooden model airplanes. He couldn't do that for years and years and years before the surgery. Just a truly gratifying experience.
Oh, I'm sure. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, so it is a miracle. It stays a miracle, right? Even veteran surgeons always tell me that they it never grows old, right? So I fantastic. And then how was it flying with him, from Mexico to Tampa, and how was he as a person? How was the interaction like? And feel free to share more about the hands-on experience there.
He's just I spent that experience. I spent a lot of time with him over the years as well on this project, and he's just a very gentle Gentleman, very in every sense of the word, very careful scientist, really brilliant person too to talk to, full of ideas, well thought out, positions. And I've got to know his wife Yvette a little bit too, during those experiences as well. And boy, he devoted his life to this.
Yeah.
The hard work that he put in the OR, and I don't think he would always say he hardly slept, maybe 2 or 3 hours a night. And sometimes you could tell by talking to Ben, because he would like almost
Okay.
almost fall asleep while you're having a conversation, because maybe he slept 2 hours the night before. I don't know, but he really, really very, very nice man, and just honored to get to spend time. A very easy person to talk to on a variety of topics as well.
And the Ben gun, so his 5 electrode micro electrode system, that existed already at the time, as you mentioned, right? So that was a innovation from before, or?
I think that when he was doing his micro electrode recording, I mean, he was doing that by, I'm pretty sure, pulling out one lead and reinserting it, and then doing it over and over several times.
Okay.
Then to facilitate that, that's when the Ben, somebody manufactured, maybe it was Medtronic, I think, manufactured the Ben gun. I'm not sure who named it, but it was kindly named after, an old 1800s, the Gatling gun, which kind of rotated and shot a lot of bullets all at once. So it reminded somebody of the Gatling gun. So I think somebody called it the Ben gun after that.
Interesting. Okay. Great. And then how fast did things take off, and maybe what were the obstacles in bringing this to market?
Well,
how long did it take as well? What was the time frame for these things?
Yeah, we were able to assemble European and U.S. data to support the IDE application, and we went to the panel. We had to go to a panel meeting, so there had to be an FDA review panel that reviewed the data. Safety, of course, was really important, and as well as the efficacy. And of course, a big question came up. Well, you can't blind these patients.
True.
Right? Because how do you blind somebody when their tremor goes away when you turn it off? So they kind of know.
Yeah.
And so that question came up, and somebody at the panel, right, said, look, if something so efficacious as to break the blind, what are you going to do? So we got over that hump, and then that ultimately got approval. We got first approval in Europe, so we launched that in Europe first. And then we got approval in the US. But I can tell you, not everybody was even convinced at that point. I had neurologists say, why would I do that?
Sure.
I'm not really sure it's appropriate. It's brain surgery. It's deep brain surgery. Yeah. So maybe we shouldn't have called it deep brain stimulation. It should have been something else, but that's not going to go away. And neurologists are careful physicians, and they manage medications well. So not everybody's on board with that. So we really had to, and to this day, I think some of those issues still exist, to convince people that when is the right time, and whether it's the right time to treat these patients. So, but
still very underutilized. Even
totally
today,
is.
I totally agree. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it is. It is, and I think that. Tremor is huge. 5 million people with just essential tremor in the U.S., maybe more. And Parkinsonian tremor wasn't in and of itself, just that single symptom wasn't a huge market opportunity. So that has its place, and certainly was important. I think the bigger opportunity then was just straight treating the PD. So we quickly transitioned based on Ben's work again. Without Ben, I took one of Ben's videos to the executive committee and said, here's the extension of this therapy in a Parkinsonian patient who was, couldn't move basically until you turned the device on, and he was doing all the things. And again, it's easy to convince an executive team if you got the videos, and
sure.
Yeah, that worked out well.
You mentioned the naming, and I seem to recall that was naming from Medtronic. It was not from the Grenoble team. So do you remember who gave Deep Brain Stimulation its name? Was it you or somebody in the
No,
team?
no, it wasn't. It was always, I think it's a legacy from, so most of the brain stimulation was done for pain, right? Earlier, before that. That's what most of the experience was. And it probably came from the neurosurgical community, actually, at the time. So we were sort of stuck with it, and we didn't think too much about it until we got some of the marketing people got involved, and they realized that maybe deep brain is going to scare some patients off. So I think we even tried to call it a brain pacemaker,
Okay.
which really didn't stick because the field just knew it as DBS. It's always going to be DBS, and it's not going to change.
Got it. It's interesting because in I think in the last think tank, Mike Oken always has the DBS think tank every year, and I think they even discussed this, that rebranding it to what you just said, pacemaker, might be better for the same reasons. I mean, I don't even think, to me, deep is a nice thing, but you're probably right in terms of surgery. Can be scary, and then I do recall. So I think in electrical stimulation before the modern times, they I think often called it ESB, so electrical stimulation of the brain, and then I seem to recall that Marwan Harris, who's very much into the history of these things, he dug up some sort of when was it used the first time, and I think he attributed it to some Medtronic marketing, but maybe that's wrong. I don't know. It's so your recollection is that it was already in the surgical community, and then you stuck with it.
Yeah,
Got it. Okay. And so obstacles and challenges, were there any setbacks that you could recall, or investment problems or whatever?
Well, I think that I think that I don't recall any particular. I'm sure we had challenges with enrollment. Enrollment in any clinical trial is always slower than you had hoped, and sites are ambitious about what they think they can do and what they can't do. But I'm sure it was slower than we'd hoped. I'm certain of that. The other thing, which I think is instructive from this experience, and I talked a couple times about the videos. I was convinced that you show anybody the video, how can you argue with it? Even not just internally, but the outside world.
Sure.
You can show a spiral diagram before and after, and it's obvious.
Obvious, yeah.
But we were not, and we're trying to grow a business, right? The medical device business, we have to work with clinicians and scientists to move these things forward, but it's a commercial enterprise in the end. You have to bring it to patients. Otherwise, it's not even worth, almost not worth doing. I wouldn't say it's not worth. But we just weren't sitting there and taking calls from neurosurgeons around the world. Can I get a device? It takes a lot of work now. Once the therapy is approved, there's a core people that know a lot about it who participate in the clinical trial, but the run-of-the-mill neurologist, neurosurgeon in private practice, maybe they read the literature, maybe they don't, but they don't know about this probably.
Yeah.
So you do have to get the word out, and that's a big lift from a company.
Sure.
To educate, train the neurosurgeons, educate on the right patients, getting reimbursement codes for all of this. All that takes a lot of time, and it wasn't from day one that we had a successful commercial therapy. It took several years of building and the capabilities to support the implants in the OR, using the technology. All that stuff had to be developed over time, and so that was a big challenge, and it's the same challenge for any new therapy. It could be the most effective therapy in the world. It doesn't. There's still a lot more work to do after that.
Makes sense. Yeah, PR, getting the word out, educating. I can imagine. Yeah. So the army of sales reps that Medtronic had that were probably usually talking to the cardiologists all of a sudden also had to talk to neurosurgeons and neurologists and so on. That makes sense. And it was like you grew that business, right? So I never worked in industry. I picture that a bit as kind of a startup within Medtronic. Is that a good description of that?
Yep.
That entity of neuromodulation. Okay, great.
Yeah, it was a brand new. So the business, the neuromodulation business at Medtronic consisted of spinal cord stimulation at the time. So that was a homegrown new indication, and that's a very effective treatment, and it's evolved over the years. But Medtronic was the originator of that therapy, and then we took that same technology and extended, in an opportunistic way, serendipity. Without Ben, we would probably have done that. And then we created a new business out of that work that he did, along with the other clinicians who were involved and patients, by the way, who, Mr. Schaefer was the first guy in the US that's agreed to sign. You got to give the patients a huge amount of credit for their courage, to be willing to put their trust in the clinicians and the company that this is the right thing for them to do. We can't lose. We can't lose sight of that. But along the line, then we were able to, the business that I had also was an implantable pump for spasticity, intrathecal baclofen. So that was part of the business that I managed, which is also homegrown business as well within the company. So Medtronic was really good at that in those days. And year over year we grew. We were able to treat more patients. In turn, we were able to hire more salespeople, hire more technologists who could go in and support the OR. So that's how you grow that kind of business year over year. But it all has to go back to the safety and efficacy of the technology, number one.
Sure.
And then you can extend that over time.
Apart from the Grenoble team, were there any clinical partners, maybe in the US or Europe, that stuck out that were really instrumental of making it a success or being good partners in developing this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go back and I think that when we were launching and getting these things clinically validated into the marketplace, I'll go back again. Warren Alano was really instrumental. Mm-hmm. I think Joe Jankovic, and the Emory group, Jerry Vitek, the surgeons there, and Malin DeLong, the Gainesville group. Yeah. Michael Oakland's really helpful, and Kelly Foote. I think Kelly even went and trained he spent some time in Grenoble. Quite a few neurosurgeons did go through there. So
he did. He trained with both Ben and Malin, I think, and mentioned that he would love for them to get the Nobel Prize.
Wouldn't that be awesome? Yeah. That'd be so great.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Andres Lozano, this is in Toronto, and Tony Lang were really very, very helpful with the company, helping us, plan ahead and get things right for the clinicians. And Jose Obeso was involved. Yeah. Early on, he was really excited, instrumental. He had done a lot of great basic research and clinical research too to support mechanism of action. We had a really awesome set of advisors and collaborators, and I just want to emphasize that companies don't do these things on their own. It's a really collaborative effort between clinicians, scientists. A company can bring resources to bear. We can. It's only one small part of it.
Not small part, I think, but certainly. And then you did also launch the Kinetra at Medtronic, which was the first dual channel DBS system. Can you maybe in brief walk us through the, I'm sure, long winding process of getting such a new medical device to market? Yeah, I think before that, everybody's implanting two devices, right? One on each side. Yeah. And it was acceptable, but of course, let's make this an easier process for a patient. So we were able to we had a parallel initiative in the spinal cord stimulation business with a device called Synergy, mm-hmm. which is the same thing as Kinetra, except that Kinetra was modified specifically for DBS slightly.
And to get the next generation device approved is much easier than the first generation.
Sure.
So for the single channel devices, again, we had to go through the whole FDA process. The review of the data was a difficult, and by FDA was a difficult process, and we had to go to panel once again to explain to the panel why this is a safe and effective treatment, acceptable risk benefit profile. We knew which patients it was going to be used for. The first labeling was only for advanced, Parkinson's patient, but FDA was very specific and deliberate about that. So that part of it was the heavy lift there. Getting Connector approved was more straightforward because the path had already been, had been laid.
Yeah.
And I don't know if have you ever seen the Connector device though?
Well, it's been a while. I don't even know. I'm not sure.
It's a pretty big
yeah.
device.
Yeah.
And the concerns were, oh, this is too big. Nobody's gonna want to implant this. But it's the only thing we could do at the time, and we had the analogy would be, Secremed pump was pretty big too, and people implanted that. So that was that was the experience there, and of course, getting smaller devices was always on the development plan for all of our technology.
And I remember back then, so I think that's not being done much anymore, that some of the devices were also implanted in the abdomen with an extension down, right? So not to be in the chest as usual, but I guess with the big form factor that was probably more tolerable to some.
Maybe some people did that. I don't know. I don't recall anybody actually doing it as a standard approach. Pumps were normally in the abdomen too, of course.
Yeah.
Although some Synchromed pumps for intravenous infusion were implanted subclavicular region as well. So that wasn't uncommon to have that size of device in that space.
No, it was certainly not the standard approach. But I do remember individual patients at Charité where we did that, and I think that was post Kinetra already. Because
Oh, okay.
But okay. Interesting. And then in 2004, you became vice president and general manager of the global movement disorder business at Medtronic and grew the business, according to your CV, from 230 to 350 million in 3 years. You also led the acquisition and integration of image-guided neurologics, who developed the next frame and I think the Stealth Station. Can you share some insights about the importance of maybe this acquisition, also in general, about startup acquisitions and how valuable that can be?
So companies like Medtronic would make acquisitions when it's faster to make that acquisition than develop it internally, faster and more cost effective to do that, or when we don't have the technology ourselves or the wherewithal to even do that. And so NextFrame fit into the latter in that we were wrestling with STN procedures took a long time. And so time is money in the OR, and neurosurgeons only have so much OR time. And so we were trying to think of ways to streamline the procedure to make it more commercially viable for hospitals and neurosurgeons in terms of time. And we thought NextFrame might be a good way to do that. You didn't have to do the stereotactic frame. Frames were thought to be uncomfortable for patients, and I think they are. And we thought NextFrame would be a great way to sort of advance what we call procedure solutions. Put everything in a package so we can make the procedure streamlined. Well, changing the practice of medicine is very, very difficult. It takes a long time. People do what they're trained to do in fellowship programs, and that's how they do it.
Yeah.
And the acquisition was not really successful in advancing the field from a procedure standpoint. I have to say that. Although we did, with that acquisition, get the Stimlock, because they had a really nice burr hole ring and cap situation, that's really what we got out of that, to be honest with you. We didn't get the other part of what we thought we were going to get. So, oops. And Stealth Station wasn't part of that, but we did have a sister acquisition in Colorado that we bought that ultimately was going to be great for bringing to bear on the procedure itself and planning, improving accuracy, improving timing. So our goal was to try to combine all those things into one package. And with the people who are experts, like people like Franz Gielen, we wanted to clone people like Franz Gielen who were neurophysiologists who could go in the OR and provide value to the neurosurgeons instead of just opening up packets and handing it to them. So people and technology was part of that process. And I think by and large, that's proven out to be successful. I know Boston has Brain Lab, and they've got great technology, great people too, doing similar things. So we're trying to make the business of applying DBS just more straightforward and more efficient.
Sounds good. Cool. Fantastic. So maybe to wrap up that part of your career, you said it was a small part being like on the company side, but I think it was also a really big part to bring this into market. And you really led that effort. So when you see a patient now these days with SDN DBS, or even maybe in friends and family, somebody that had the surgery and see the dramatic effects it has, how is that feeling? I ask the same question to Pierre Polak and Tage Bergman, who were in the podcast, but you really made that happen together with others, of course. I'm sure it's a great feeling, but can you share that?
Yeah, it's really gratifying, and at the time you're not really sure what's going to happen with these things, and it doesn't. In a career, maybe you get an opportunity like this, maybe once, maybe never, right? A lot of things. I was just fortunate to be given the responsibility to take this on, and I didn't know where I was going to go necessarily. I didn't. Some days I didn't know what I was doing. Honestly,
sure.
We'd have setbacks, but we had a really good team to do this, and I just think one thing about being with Medtronic, they did give me a lot of opportunity to succeed or fail, and I thank the company for doing that. Scott Ward was my boss at the time. He signed me to this project, and he was a great mentor there. And one saying that success has many fathers, right? A lot of people have to to work together and to make contributions to make this happen. Yeah. And so I'm not the only one. I had a ringside seat though, which was great.
Fantastic. Yeah. And then after Medtronic in 2007, you went into cardiology at CVRX. I won't go too much into detail unless you want to share from that period, because then in 2011, you essentially came back to the field of DBS as CEO of Functional Neuromodulation, which you led for 10 years. Can you tell us a bit about your work there?
Yeah, I liked the experience at Medtronic, and an adventure within a company was really gratifying. So I looked upon functional neuromodulation as sort of maybe a recreation of that potentially. And Andres Lozano had some great, some very compelling data from fornix stimulation. And I had known Andres, of course, for a long time, and he and Dan O'Connell started a company to advance this, and which is really these days probably the most efficient way to do that, to raise money to do the next stage of clinical development. And so I said, yeah, okay, I'd love to be a part of that. And we built upon his 5 or 6 patient pilot study and generated some funding. Medtronic was an investor at the time, and venture capital, Genesis Capital in Toronto, invested in that. And so we got FDA to approve a feasibility study of 40 plus patients. And we went to sort of the same sites we had worked with in the past with DBS experience. And it was for Alzheimer's disease, basically mild AD. And again, patients, signed up for the study, put their faith and trust in the company and the technology. And we were able to complete a 42 patient study, and showed a sign that we could slow the progression of the disease. And this is a difficult study to do because if you're looking at disease progression, how do you design a study to demonstrate that? You have to have a pretty long control period, which
Sure.
we set as 12 months.
Hmm.
So everybody got implanted, and half the patients were turned on, half the patients were kept off for 12 months, and we didn't know if anybody would sign up for that. But lo and behold, again, patients do, when people sign up for clinical studies, they're doing it for a reason as well, to advance the science as well as hopefully a benefit. And that's pretty amazing. And so we did get an effect. We had to go down to a subgroup to find the effect, but we were able to generate an effect on the standard tools to measure cognition that are used in Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah.
We had great results in the PET scans that correlated with the clinical outcomes.
Yeah.
And we were able to translate that into CE mark actually for Boston Scientific's device eventually, even though we used Medtronic early on. And then so that was that was a great study that we did, and I think that the next phase we were able then to raise additional funds through Boston,
Yeah.
and the venture firm to expand that into a pivotal trial, which the company is in the middle of that pivotal trial right now. I think there's 70 or 80 patients in. And it takes a long time to advance these things, though. When I left, I turned around and it had been 9 or 10 years
Yeah.
to get this
Yeah.
done. And there was an interlude between the first study and the second study that added time there. But it's not for the faint of heart, these startups.
I can imagine, yeah. And I think it's even in a way a little known fact that there is CE mark for fornix DBS in Europe. What does that mean? Do you know? Like, could people, do you know if people could actually go to their DBS surgeons and get it and even get reimbursed, or can you talk about that? Even only answer if this is easy to talk about, but
Yeah.
I always wondered that.
So we the medical device regulations were in the process of changing a lot in Europe, and so we went back and forth with the notified body who gives the approvals. It was a German notified body, and we got the approval, and then it was for a specific device. At the time, we were working with Boston Scientific, but the data we had was on Medtronic technology, and so we actually were able to convince the TUV that Boston's the same as Medtronic, so they said okay. And we wouldn't have done that without Boston's support, so because they're the commercial entity, of course, selling this. I think what Boston, even though they had the CE mark, and it is in the labeling, at least maybe they removed it lately, but it was actually an indicated use for the technology. I think what Boston felt was its approval is one thing, coverage, reimbursement, acceptance, and adoption is another.
Sure.
So even though the data was compelling enough to get approval, I think Boston felt that we needed more. And so we need that randomized controlled trial to go out and broaden the application. I think that was their decision-making process, which makes total sense.
Yeah, got it. And then you left to Biotronik in 2021. Was it because you were recruited away, or did you want to leave, or was there a good reason to leave the startup world again, or?
No, I didn't want to leave. I loved working with Andres and the team there, Vince Owens, and the clinical sites. They're all great. But you mentioned I looked back and I realized it had been 10 years since.
Yeah.
So I got a call from the Biotronik people, and they were launching a new spinal cord stimulator into the marketplace for chronic intractable pain. And just for reference, that's about a $2 billion business in the U.S. So it's quite a lot bigger than the DBS business.
Yeah.
However, the competition is fierce. It's Medtronic, Abbott, Boston Scientific. Nevro was a new player in the marketplace with a high frequency stimulation. So my first question to them is, does the world really need another spinal cord stimulator in the marketplace? And I had exposure to that from Medtronic, so I knew something about the business still. but they had a very compelling proposition to bring some value to the marketplace. And I studied it and convinced myself that this was a very competitive product they were trying to bring forward. And I said, yeah, this would be great to be a part of this, even though we've got we're competing against fantastic companies and fantastic technology. So I decided to take the leap. And so just for your benefit as well, Biotronik is you're German, so you may have heard of Biotronik, right? So they're based in Berlin. Do you know them?
I know I don't, and I had not. In fact, yeah.
Well, let
So
me
I
tell you
Googled them.
about
Yeah.
Biotronik. So
Please.
they're a German-based, the privately held company. So they're owned by an individual. The founder is Max Sheldack, who developed the company at the same time Earl Bakken was developing a U.S. pacemaker for the U.S. marketplace with Medtronic. So they were contemporaries, and he worked very similar story to Earl's. He worked to develop a pacemaker for the German market in the early '60s. And they've grown tremendously over the years. They're a cardiovascular-based company worldwide. And the current owner, Max Jr., is a brilliant technologist and really excited about neuromodulation and using, just as Medtronic did, expanding the base technology to a new indication. So
Yeah.
they worked for several years, made a commitment to the spinal cord stimulation space and developed this SCS device. And so that's where we're competing. I'll tell you about the technology, but Max went to a neuromodulation meeting in Barcelona summer before last, and I showed him around, introduced him to different people, and the end of the first day, I go, Max, what do you think? This is great, isn't it? Neuromodulation is fantastic. We're really, really excited. He goes, yes, Todd. And now you must deliver. So now that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to deliver on the promises.
Fantastic. And it is so one question that I should know more about but don't. In Germany, my feeling always was that SCS was not such a big thing. Unfortunately, I think, because it's great technology, but somehow, I worked a bit in neurology. I rarely crossed paths with it, and then my grandfather had pain, and I really even didn't know who would even do that in Germany. Like, is that true, or did I just not know my own country? So is it underutilized in comparison to the US in Germany? Would you know?
Yeah, I would say so. I say 80%. Yeah. So the $2 billion market in the US, that's 80% of the worldwide revenue usage is in the US. Germany is a big market relative to the other countries in Europe, and Australia is also big. And I'm not sure these days but in the US, the pain management subspecialty has really grown tremendously. So you have anesthesiologists doing pain management, physical medicine rehabilitation people, and neurosurgeons all doing pain management. So they have a whole armamentarium of technologies and treatments now they can provide specifically for pain relief. Yeah. So it's really been great for patients with chronic intractable pain. And SCS is one component of their armamentarium, and it's used for patients with pain of the trunk and limbs. Been used in Europe a little bit for angina and PVD. Germany was a big PVD market for SCS, but that's how it's typically utilized.
Yeah, makes sense. And just for the record, I think we do have good pain management in general in Germany, but just the SCS component, I think not many surgeons do it, and then even not many centers offer it. It was my impression, and so that's a great opportunity to expand, especially working for a Berlin-based company. But you are in Minnesota, right? So you work remotely, I assume. Yeah,
so the company's U.S. headquarters is based in Lake Oswego, so they also do manufacturing there, as well as in Berlin. And so I go back and forth to Lake Oswego, and they have other subcomponents of the Biotronik family. So they do manufacturing for other kinds of businesses. Even in the neuromodulation space, they do contract manufacturing. So they're great. They're an impressive company.
And your current job description is president of the Neuromodulation Business at Biotronik. So how does your typical day look like? A lot of Zoom calls or a lot of travels, or what do you typically do? It's probably hard to say.
So we just launched in the U.S. marketplace in April. We got approval March 31st. And so now we're trying to compete, as I mentioned, against these big companies as a sixth player in the marketplace. So we've got every year we establish annual objectives. What do we want to accomplish this year? How do we advance our business? And so I use those objectives, and we also have a 5-year strategy plan. But if we nail down what we want to get done this year, we've got a list of 10 to 12 top things we want to accomplish as a business. So my goal is focusing on those every day to make sure we're executing on achieving those goals. As you can imagine, resources are not infinite. So even though we're a growing business, I say I always want more resources available. So I'm managing upward within the organization. Try to convince Berlin that we're an outpost in the U.S. So you need to understand we need more resources. So I'm doing a lot of managing upward, and then just day to day, we're solving problems. As we launch our technology, there are things that we're learning once we get in the marketplace that need to be addressed very quickly, and so we need to address those. Motivating team members and the entire organization, because we're a new player within the Biotronik family, and frankly, the company's made commitments, sacrifices even, to support the neuro business to get to where we are today. And so I just want to make sure the company who have made those sacrifices are aware that we're doing something important for the marketplace.
Yeah. Since we mainly talk about DBS in the podcast, some of the listeners might not even exactly know what SCS is. Could you maybe give a quick summary, and then also, if you can talk or want to talk about it, what the benefits of the Biotronik product are compared to others?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So spinal cord stimulation is a way to treat patients who have failed pretty much most other interventions, and typically the typical indication would be chronic back and limb pain, often as a result of failed surgery in the back area. So you implant electrodes very similar to what we put in the brain, but they're placed epidurally, between T7, T9 typically. 2 of those, and they get attached again to a stimulator, much like a brain stimulator, DBS stimulator, with a battery, electronics. And so it's all implanted, and it sends electrical current to the spinal cord from the epidural space, and it masks the pain essentially. Yeah. And so that's what it is, and it's a very effective treatment. Lots of clinical data supporting this. It's been around since the 70s, and what Biotronik has done, which I think is really, really unique and could be extended to other areas of neuromodulation and DBS, is that the device that we implant is a digital device in addition to being a device with a battery and sending electrical current to the body. It's capable of collecting all sorts of information about how the patient's interacting with the device. Is the device on or off? How often has it been recharged? Are there any impedance issues with the electrodes? So that information gets sent to via Bluetooth to the patient programmer, and that data goes up to the cloud. So we're able to monitor interaction, how the device is performing and how the patient's interacting with the device daily. Whereas heretofore, the device has been implanted and then patients go away. They come back for follow-up, but they could go away and then go home and then not realize they've turned their device off, because they're not neuromodulation experts. And by the time they figure that out, they have to call the rep. The rep has to call the physician. It could be days, weeks, or even longer before they get a visit scheduled with the physician to address it. And it could be a matter of just turning it back. Oh, your device is off. Believe me, that
Mm.
happens. Simple.
Yeah.
We are able to also program the device via cellular from anywhere in the world.
Wow.
You don't need Wi-Fi. You can just program it. And these programming visits are you don't have to do those. Whereas before, just to turn it back on, you have to schedule a visit with a physician. It takes time,
Of
clinic
course.
time, all that stuff is a problem. And so, and once we can do that, and we can also figure out if the device needs attention. So sometimes the device does need attention. You need to bring the patient back. So we think we can help improve the outcomes by focusing on what's happened after the implant. And this is built on a legacy of Biotronik doing this for 20 years. So cybersecurity technology capable of doing this is not trivial. And so we're leveraging our experience in cardiac rhythm management to be able to bring this, what I think is a unique innovation to the neuromodulation field.
Fantastic. Okay, very, very exciting. Thanks for that. And then any key roadmaps on that the company plans that you can already share of new things, or I think you cannot, even if you had plans to go into DBS, you probably wouldn't be able to talk about it, but anything in the SCS market that you're excited about that's upcoming potentially?
So so I'm president of Biotronik's Neuro business, right?
Yeah.
We talked a lot about SCS. I'm not the president of the SCS business. That's our beachhead, so we need to be successful there. But we definitely have plans to branch out and use our technology capabilities, German quality engineering design, and innovation to other areas of neuromodulation. So we're scanning the horizon to see where the best opportunities, exist, for Biotronik to invest in, and we're very bullish on neuro, I am personally. So I'm trying to, and I think our leader, our owner, Max is also. We're just trying to figure out the right ways to allocate our resources.
Fantastic. And then on the podcast, I mainly speak with scientists and clinicians and sometimes patients, but we haven't heard many representatives from industry, as I mentioned. But we both know that academics continuously wonder, or may wonder, whether a life in industry could be more rewarding for them. Could you steelman the case to work for industry compared to academia? And of course, also feel free to talk about downsides as well.
Sure. So let's see. So when I worked at the University of Minnesota, I was just in my 20s.
Yeah.
And I was in awe of the different, the physicians there, the scientists, and I thought, my word, all the smart people in the world are here in this university, on university settings. And then I get, sort of those industry people, what do they really know? And then I got exposed to the people at Medtronic. And, well, I guess I'm wrong here, because there's a lot of really smart people in Medtronic too, PhDs,
I'm sure.
scientists, and I really changed my thinking. And then I'll just extend that a little bit. Then I thought everybody in Medtronic are the smartest people, and nobody else in the world. And boy, was I wrong there. So I apologize to everybody who I was thinking about like that. But I think sometimes scientists maybe I'm wrong here, but they're just a bunch of business people in the company. They don't really know much about, they're accountants and trying to make revenue. There are business people there for sure.
Sure.
But they're very smart marketing people, commercial people, communication, clinical people, scientists, engineers who are world class. And so if you're a scientist thinking you don't want to get into industry because it won't be that interesting, maybe just a bunch of business people telling scientists what to do, it's really not the case. And companies can bring, big companies like Medtronic or Boston Abbott and others can bring large amounts of resources to bear on a project if they're committed to it.
Yeah.
And in the academic world, it's fighting all the time, and people are really good at getting funding in academia, and you've been successful in others, but It's tough to do that. I'm not saying it's easy in a big company, but the resources, if you're on a cool project committed by the company, there's a lot of opportunity, and you
Hmm.
have access then to world-class scientists, technologists, both within and outside the company that you continue to foster those relationships with. So if you left academia to go to industry, you're not severing ties. You're still got to work
Sure.
with all those colleagues,
Of course. Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
to advance, because it's a collaborative effort. So I would say that's the positive side. And also for big companies, if you choose to go to a startup, you're working on they get funded because they're working on groundbreaking things, right?
Of course.
Any
Yeah.
startup who raises money, the investment comes, but it's unique, it's groundbreaking, could be a game changer for whatever field it's in. There's large potential there.
Yeah.
So that's a chance to be in a place where lightning might strike. And who knows, you could end up working on a DBS project that eventually, goes out to the marketplace and treats that, thousands and thousands of patients.
Yeah.
Downside, well, big companies, it's frustrating, but if you get big companies need bureaucracy, sometimes decisions are slow.
Hmm.
I'm not saying they're always fast in academia, but if you're working smaller groups, you may be able to make things happen quicker. Sometimes that's frustrating. Shifting priorities maybe can be frustrating. We're making a big play here this year, but all of a sudden something happens and we've got to shift priorities.
Hmm.
And then for startups, funding can run out if you don't hit your milestones. If you realize you thought was a great opportunity, it doesn't turn out to be a great one. You may end up running out of money, and then what do you do? I mean, it's nerve-wracking it's not for the faint of heart. It's nerve-wracking for the people trying to raise the money, who managing people who want to get paid next month. And I've been there where
Of
we
course.
have enough money for the next few months, everybody. So, especially COVID was difficult. So that's not for the faint. Highs are high, valleys are peaks and valleys.
Hmm.
So that's not for the faint of heart, but you could be working on something groundbreaking if you do take that jump.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. That's very insightful. And just for the record, I really have deep respect towards people in the industry. I even think, I could probably not do that, because the academia feels a bit more like a safe harbor where it's more about, the arts for the arts to some degree, right? You guys really have to, the stuff you develop has to actually work. And of course, we try that in academia too, but it's not that so much depends on it, right? It's more like a paper versus no. So I have deep respect, and I think developing, a business like you did for Medtronic, but also now, is so fantastic. And I'm sure you have to be very smart to do that well. So, yeah. But I get the general sense that maybe sometimes academia sits a bit on the high horse and thinks they're the smartest or so. I really don't think that's true. They have but it was a great summary just to hear the pros and cons. Thank you for that. And then maybe to move on and also slowly wrap up already. What's your feeling toward the general state of investments in the field of DBS and neuromodulation? Do you think we live in bullish or bearish times? You already mentioned that you feel bullish, but maybe worldwide, is there a lot of investment currently going on, or is it scarce? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm very bullish on it, and I go to a lot of the conferences, the neuromodulation conferences, and even the pre-conference meetings to see what's new and in the marketplace, what's being invested in.
Hmm.
And I think there's always investment available for great ideas. Although in 23, I think in 22, or in 20, it might be down a little bit overall, venture investing in medical technology in general. But I think in neuro, I read a report from one of the banks on this. Investing in the neuro and medical devices for neuro is pretty high. There's
Okay.
$1.3 billion invested last year in 43 different deals, and that's just for perspective. That's the highest versus imaging, surgical opportunities, cardiovascular and ortho. So there's a lot of activity going on in the neurospace. It's not all DBS.
Sure.
It's neuromodulation, peripheral nerve, vagus nerve stimulation. But I think it's a good time. I think it's a really good time to be in the neurosciences field because there are just so many people sort of working on these problems and challenges, and the technology is sort of keeping up with the demands of the scientists and clinicians, like closed loop. All right, closed loop things are happening. So I'm very bullish, as you can tell.
What do you think the next big breakthrough will be, or is it around the corner? What could it be?
These are always these next breakthroughs take a long time to develop, right? And then there are suddenly a breakthrough. But I'm really excited about a few things. I've been paying attention to Mayberg's work in depression for a long time, and I think that is really going to reach a point where it's going to benefit a lot of patients. If you think about the initial studies when they were designed, heterogeneous problem, long-standing disease, illness, and then they expected people to get better in 3 months. That was a pretty tough ask, right? Sure. But I think they've learned a lot from that experience. Definitely people in those studies got better over time. So I think that's going to be great. I'm really excited about Nico Schiff's work in traumatic brain injury, published in Nature Neuroscience.
Yeah.
Holy cow! If that could work, that could be hugely beneficial to patients with TBI. A lot of great work with psychiatric disorders and addiction disorders. Alpern's work and Alec Wedge's work, I think is really promising. And then I think early DBS, Mallory Hacker and David Charles' work. I wish that could get some funding. Early intervention in DBS for Parkinson's disease could be really cool. I think their clinical data is very compelling. It's just moving that off the blocks is I think is really important.
Fantastic. And you've been wildly successful in life. If I forced you to leave Biotronik tomorrow, where would you go? Next step.
And any of the indications that I just mentioned, if those would be exciting. Those would really be exciting work to work on. Biotronik's a great company, but since you posed the question, I'm giving you the answer. We got a lot of work to accomplish in Biotronik, but I think if I have to answer your question, that's how I would put it.
Fantastic. And then, what were some general eureka moments that you had in your career? We talked about the one case, in Tampa in Florida. Obviously, I'm sure that was a eureka moment, but other similar experiences you may have had?
I think I mentioned this already, but one would think that if you have an effect like that, the rest of it should be easy. It should be obvious that everybody should, if you can see that, why not utilize that for everybody? But changing the practice of medicine is really, really difficult. And so people do what they do in fellowships. They learn what they learn, and it works for them. So I think maybe what people don't really understand is even with the most dramatically effective treatment or therapy out there, it still can be underutilized if people don't know about it. They're not educated properly about it. So that, I think that's a learning thing. That's a learning experience for anybody who's trying to develop a new indication or new therapy.
Do you regret anything in your professional life?
Well, one thing comes to mind when I was working back in the lab in the University of Minnesota days. Reshevsky would, I was fortunate to be on a few publications there. And then one day, for some whatever reason, I told Reshevsky that I don't really need to be on these publications. Now, why would I say that? I don't know why I said that, but I missed out on being on some really cool publications. It's 2 science papers,
wow,
that were published out of that lab, and lots of other things. So I don't know that it hurt me necessarily professionally at all, but boy, is that a dumb thing to say.
Because you already thought you would go into industry, and then
I guess I wasn't going to make my career in academia, and of
Yeah,
course, if I was going to do that, that's probably what was my thinking there. Yeah, I'm
yeah.
not going to be a PhD and work here forever, so I don't really need.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay. Any advice for young researchers entering neuroscience, academia, or maybe more importantly, industry, above and beyond not getting on science papers?
Yeah, I would say if you're interested in industry, try. It's not easiness because of travel and cost sometimes, but go to these professional society meetings.
Hmm.
And because like North American Neuromodulation Society, the International Neuromodulation Society, or local meetings, because there are a lot of industry people there who are scientists and engineers who go to those meetings. And I think just go up to them and say, "Hey, I'm so and so, thinking about industry or like to learn. Can you point me to the right person here I can talk to?" I guarantee you, anybody in one of those booths, they look intimidating. Lots of people in suits are standing around,
Yeah.
But go up to one of those people. I'll guarantee you they may be a scientist themselves, they may be an engineer themselves, or they can put you in touch with somebody there who could explain to you what it's like to be in industry, who was also, in academia for a while, actually got their PhD, then went to
Hmm.
industry eventually. So that's a way to build a relationship or network with those people, and you can get some inside info that way. And that'd be a really good way to do that.
Fantastic. And then, yeah, the future of the field. How will neuromodulation in 10 years look like? You covered some of the new indications already, so maybe it's redundant, but any other insights on that?
I'd say companies are focused on score size and those kinds of things, but I think they're also looking at ways to close the loop and being a little bit more elegant
Hmm.
rather than just pound the nervous system 24 hours a day with current.
Yeah.
That works, but it could probably be improved upon, and the signal that you're basing that stimulation on probably comes from somewhere else within the brain.
Hmm.
So sensing one place, stimulating another place,
Yeah.
maybe not continuously either. Could be, I think those will be some future advancements. And then using the technology that's already implanted to provide the clinician some information about what's going on in the brain or the outcome itself that can then be utilized to advance the outcome.
Yeah.
So to me, those are important things. And of course, there's brain-computer interface that we're always in the news. And the Onward company who's doing work on paraplegic people, really fantastic and beautiful work. I should have mentioned that early on. Those things are really extremely promising and exciting.
So you mean in general? Did you mention a specific company or?
So Onward, there's a company
Onward,
in
yeah.
Switzerland, Onward, which is using spinal cord stimulation for getting
Yes. Okay. So
patients. Yeah.
Jocelyn Bloch and Courtine's work, I think, right? That you
DPFL,
yeah.
Really
Fantastic.
cool,
Yeah.
really cool work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And very exciting.
Been trying to get them on the podcast too, and they even said yes once, but I didn't follow up enough. So should try again. So yeah, fantastic. Last question: missed opportunities as a field. So do you think there's something we should do but are not doing well enough?
Boy, I don't think I really have a good answer to that. Maybe I think maybe that if academia could do, and maybe even industry here, is just try to get more young people in the field, and because I think that's the more people thinking about the problems and the challenges that we have, and if we can get more funding in these areas, the future depends on the people, right? It really depends on the people thinking about this stuff. So I would, every chance we get, we should try to entice, bright people to enter this field.
That's a fantastic closing statement. I love that. Anything I should have asked that we did not cover? I know I covered a lot of ground, but
I think you're very thorough in your questioning. So I give
it's a
you an
nice
A+.
way of saying that I took a lot of your time, and I thank you again for taking so much time for this talk. Fantastic.
It's been great, Andreas. You do great work, and I look forward to listening to your podcast this summer while I'm riding around the Minneapolis lakes.